The naive conviction that a mother's profound, unwavering affection could eventually cultivate gratitude in her child was a belief I once cherished. A fragile hope I clung to. I never, in the darkest recesses of my imagination, conceived that the very son I had painstakingly raised, the boy whose every need I had prioritized, would surreptitiously orchestrate the acquisition of a substantial life insurance policy in my name. Or that he would then meticulously plot to stage my demise as an unfortunate, tragic accident during a deceptively innocent hiking trip. What Colin, my son, remained blissfully unaware of was that I, his supposedly frail and unsuspecting mother, was the one who had already set a far more intricate, far more definitive plan into inexorable motion. Colin, I've just completed the wire transfer of $30,000 to your account, I announced, my voice intentionally modulated to sound as gentle and unassuming as ever as I dialed his number. Please, make absolutely certain to purchase some excellent prenatal supplements for Vanessa. You must take impeccable care of her and the precious baby, all right? Colin's chuckle on the other end was immediate, his tone offensively upbeat, almost performatively effortless, as if he had always been the deeply caring husband and eternally grateful son he so artfully pretended to be. Of course, Mom, I'm going to be a father now. Can you believe it? You better believe I'll take the absolute best care of Vanessa and our little bundle of joy. I was poised to say something more, perhaps to just linger in that fabricated moment of shared warmth a little longer, to absorb one last drop of his feigned affection, when he abruptly cut me off, his voice suddenly rushed, impatient. All right, Mom, I've really got to run now. Got a ton of stuff going on over here, super busy. Not even a fleeting hint of gratitude warmed his tone. Not even a perfunctory, simple thank you for the significant sum. I swallowed down the familiar, bitter flicker of disappointment, forcing a soft, maternal response. Okay then, dear. Love you, sweetheart. But just as my finger hovered over the disconnect button, I heard the one sentence, uttered in a careless, conspiratorial undertone, that would reverberate through the chambers of my mind for the remainder of my life. Finally, the old woman actually sent the money. The old woman actually sent the money? My heart plummeted, a stone dropping into an icy abyss. It was Vanessa's voice, sharp and avaricious. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, still desperately, foolishly, clinging to a microscopic sliver of hope. Maybe Colin would say something, anything, to defend me, even just a half-hearted, mumbled word of protest. But I couldn't have been more tragically, devastatingly wrong. Colin scoffed, the sound sharp, derisive, and utterly dismissive. She's too damn cautious, that one. We had to fake an entire pregnancy, go through all that charade just to pry that amount of cash out of her. My fingers began to tremble uncontrollably. Gripping the phone with such force I was surprised. The plastic didn't crack. In that single, brutal instant, every warm, cherished memory of him, every carefully hoarded moment of perceived affection, shattered like brittle, irreplaceable glass, leaving nothing behind but a profound, bone-deep, bitter chill in my chest. Colin had always exhibited a reckless, almost pathological, disregard for money. Long before he ensnared Vanessa, he would frequently come to me, his expression a practiced mask of contrition for handouts. These requests were constant, a relentless financial drain, sometimes a few $100s for some vaguely defined emergency, sometimes thousands for a can't-miss business opportunity, even tens of thousands at a time, to bail him out of some self-inflicted predicament. And I, blinded by a mother's enduring, often irrational hope, helped him. Every single time. When he foolishly racked up substantial gambling debts, his eyes wide with a feigned terror, I was the one patiently, painstakingly, patching up his messes, filling one gaping financial hole after another. But I wasn't entirely naive. I wasn't a complete fool. I knew, on some level, what he was truly like, the selfish, manipulative core beneath the charming veneer. I always held back a little something, maintained a discreet safety net, a financial cushion tucked away just in case of ultimate betrayal. This time, though, I had let my guard down completely, seduced by the emotionally charged announcement that Vanessa was pregnant, that I was to become a grandmother. And now, with that overheard conversation, I finally saw the unvarnished, ugly truth for what it was. A truth colder than any Siberian winter, sharper than any assassin's keenly honed knife. After their ostentatious wedding, which I had largely financed, Colin rarely bothered to visit me. The phone calls, once sporadic, grew fewer and farther between, eventually dwindling to near silence. I told myself, with a mother's desperate rationalization, that he was just busy, that newly married life was demanding, that he was trying to establish his own household. I meticulously constructed 1,000 flimsy excuses for his neglect, for his emotional absence. But today, the brutal reality struck me with the force of a physical blow. I had never truly mattered in his world, not as a person, only as a resource. Through the still open phone line, Vanessa's cheerful, oblivious voice floated in, a jarring counterpoint to my internal devastation, as she and Colin animatedly chatted about how they should spend my money, the money I had worked my entire life to save. I stood frozen, a statue of grief, in the very middle of my familiar living room, the phone still clutched in my numb hand, while a hollow, echoing silence rang in my ears, as if the entire world were pointing and laughing at my gullibility, my enduring maternal folly. Only when the line finally, mercifully, disconnected did the full weight of it hit me. I regretted everything, every sacrifice, every bailout, every misplaced hope. But the profound tragedy was that this devastating realization, this final disillusionment, had arrived far, far too late. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't have possibly anticipated, was that just 2 short days later, Colin, my estranged son, would brazenly show up at my doorstep. After living a solitary existence for so many years, the sudden sharp sound of someone knocking on my front door felt almost alien, unfamiliar. I rubbed my tired eyes, smoothed down my apron, walked slowly to the door, and opened it to find Colin standing there, a picture of feigned filial concern, with Vanessa, her expression equally artful, positioned right beside him. "Colin." I offered a warm, practiced smile, carefully modulating my tone to sound as natural, as unsuspecting as possible. "What a lovely surprise. What brings you here today?" He grinned, that familiar, charming grin that had disarmed me so many times in the past, as if everything between us was perfectly normal, entirely untroubled. He casually handed me a brightly colored gift bag, pushing it into my arms without a second thought. "Oh, just had a free day, Mom," he said breezily, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Figured I'd drop by and check on you, see how you're doing." He gestured towards the bag. "Brought you some of those fancy new supplements, too. Thought you could probably use a little boost to maintain your good health, you know." Vanessa quickly, smoothly, chimed in, flashing that polished, perfectly rehearsed smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Helen, dear, you have absolutely no idea. Colin talks about you all the time when we're at home. He's just been so incredibly swamped with work lately, poor thing. He simply hasn't had a proper chance to visit." I looked at the pair of them, at their earnest expressions, their carefully crafted concern, and couldn't help but laugh inwardly, a silent, bitter amusement. They really were utterly committed to the act, weren't they? Playing their deceitful parts to absolute perfection. Well then, if they wanted to perform, I had no particular problem joining their little theatrical production. "Oh, just the thought means so much to me. It truly does," I said softly, patting Colin's arm with a convincing display of maternal affection. "Come on in, both of you. Don't just stand there on the porch." As soon as he stepped into the familiar comfort of my living room, Colin gestured expansively for me to sit. "Mom, please, don't just stand there hovering. Let's sit down, have a proper chat for a little while." I already had a strong, intuitive feeling that this unexpected visit wasn't merely about a friendly, filial check-in. And sure enough, my instincts proved correct. He scratched his head in that deliberately casual, almost boyish way he had, glanced sideways at Vanessa for a fleeting moment of silent confirmation, then said, his tone almost offhandedly nonchalant. "So, Mom, you know Vanessa's pregnant, right? Well, the apartment we're currently in, it's way too cramped for a growing family. We were wondering if maybe—" I didn't answer him right away. I simply looked at them, at their hopeful, expectant faces, and allowed a faint, enigmatic smile to play on my lips. Vanessa, ever the opportunist, jumped in quickly, letting out a soft, put-upon sigh, as if the very idea pained her deeply. "It's really been so terribly hard, Helen. The place is so tight, honestly, and now with the baby on the way, it's just not a healthy environment for me, or for the little one. We're so worried." My, oh my, there it was. The carefully laid trap. They'd clearly been eyeing this house, my house, for a very long time. The comfortable single-family home I live in, the one Richard and I bought and lovingly maintained for decades, is nestled in a quiet, safe, highly desirable neighborhood near the city center, with excellent schools and every conceivable amenity nearby. Its property value, I knew, had long since surpassed the $1 million mark. Colin grew up here. He knows exactly what it's worth, down to the last penny. I nodded slightly, my voice deliberately calm, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Of course you can. This is your home too, Colin." His eyes lit up instantly, a predatory gleam I recognized all too well, though something in his face, a subtle tension around his mouth, showed he wasn't fully satisfied yet. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed a little further, clearly testing the waters, gauging my resistance. "Well, Mom, since we're going to be living here anyway, together as a family, maybe it makes more practical sense to put the house officially in my name. That way, I can handle all the complicated property taxes, the ongoing maintenance stuff, all those tedious little details. Take it completely off your plate so you don't have to worry about a thing. Vanessa followed up smoothly, her voice tender, almost condescendingly solicitous. "Exactly, Helen dear. We're family, right? You've done more than enough for everyone your whole life. You should be relaxing now, enjoying your retirement, not worrying about tiresome chores and mounting bills." Listening to their cloying, transparent little duet, I felt a strange, almost unsettling sense of detachment, even a detached amusement. Once upon a time, not so long ago, I would have agonized endlessly over every one of Colin's increasingly outrageous requests, willingly, foolishly, giving up anything and everything for him, for his perceived happiness. But now, he acted as if everything I owned, everything I had worked for, was his by default, by divine right. As if all I needed to hear was his patronizing, "You're my mom," and I'd simply roll over and unquestioningly hand him the entire world on a silver platter. But this time, there wasn't the slightest ripple of acquiescence in my heart, only a cold, hard resolve. "Sure," I said softly, my voice a silken trap. Colin froze for a moment, his jaw slackening slightly. Vanessa's carefully composed expression flickered, a flash of raw, unadulterated surprise, or perhaps suspicion, darting through her eyes, as if they genuinely hadn't expected it to be quite this easy. I simply pressed my lips together, still maintaining that faint, enigmatic smile as I looked directly at them. "Go on then," I thought, a grim satisfaction stirring within me. "Keep playing your little show. I'm actually quite curious to see just how far you think you can take this charade." Ever since I had ostensibly agreed to let Colin and Vanessa move in, the atmosphere in the house had shifted, subtly but unmistakably, into something oppressive and alien. On just their second day under my roof, Vanessa, clearly impatient, couldn't wait to cozy up next to me on the sofa, her arm draped with a false intimacy over my shoulders, wearing that carefully practiced, sugar-sweet smile that always made my skin crawl. "Helen, dear," she said gently, her voice a low purr, "how's the house transfer paperwork coming along? Any progress?" I looked up from my book, feigning a weary sigh. "Oh, it still needs a few more days, I'm afraid. The entire legal process is proving to be a bit more complicated than I initially expected, so many forms." Her smile stiffened for a fleeting moment, just a barely perceptible flicker of annoyance in her eyes, but she quickly, expertly recovered, forcing a breezy, unconcerned laugh. "Oh, that's perfectly fine, Helen. We're in absolutely no rush at all. We'll wait, of course." Of course they'd wait. They had no other viable choice, did they? Until that crucial paperwork was finalized, signed, and legally recorded, the house, my house, still legally, unequivocally, belonged to me. From that day forward, their entire demeanor shifted into something disturbingly, almost aggressively, wholesome. Vanessa, who had previously complained about the slightest household chore, suddenly started waking up at the crack of dawn to prepare elaborate, healthy breakfasts for me. Colin, who hadn't willingly lifted a finger to help around the house in years, suddenly, miraculously, offered to clean the entire kitchen after every meal, scrubbing counters with a diligence that was frankly alarming. Every word they uttered, every gesture they made, was soaked in artificial, cloying sweetness, a meticulously painted portrait of a doting, devoted daughter-in-law and a profoundly considerate, reformed son. But I knew better. I saw through their transparent performance. It was all a carefully orchestrated charade. They were just biding their time, patiently, strategically, waiting for the opportune moment to pounce. Colin had never, ever been the type to willingly serve anyone. As a boy, he had consistently treated me more like a personal maid than a mother, expecting meals on demand and countless favors as if they were his inalienable birthright. As a grown man, he barely bothered with a perfunctory phone call, let alone any genuine sign of affection or concern. And now, suddenly, he was diligently wiping down my dining table with a cheerful whistle. What an absolute contemptible joke. I had poured my entire life, my heart and soul, into raising him, sacrificed my own dreams, my own ambitions for his future. And in return, he saw me as nothing more than a convenient gold mine to be ruthlessly, systematically drained dry. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned in my familiar bed, the silence of the house pressing in on me, haunted by a persistent, nagging question that wouldn't let me go. Was I being too cold, too calculating, too heartless in my quiet machinations? But then a counter-thought arose. If I were truly, fundamentally cold, would I have forgiven him so many countless times before? Would I have consistently bent over backward, compromising my own needs, my own desires, giving him chance after endless chance to redeem himself? I kept hoping, with a mother's stubborn, often foolish optimism, that he'd eventually change, that he'd mature. I kept believing, against all evidence to the contrary, that, somehow, the sincere, unwavering power of motherly love could cure anything, could mend any flaw. And just as I was seriously questioning whether I'd become too distant, too detached, too hardened by his betrayals, I heard them. Whispers, furtive, conspiratorial whispers, coming from the living room downstairs. I'm not the kind of person who habitually eavesdrops. It's not in my nature. But in that precise moment, something primal, something fiercely protective, compelled me to move. Softly, slowly, cautiously, I crept towards my bedroom door. I pressed my ear gently to the cool wood, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And what I heard next, in their hushed, venomous tones, became a memory so vile, so devastating, that I knew I would never, ever be able to erase it. "As soon as she signs over the damn house," Colin said, his voice low, cold, and utterly devoid of any familial warmth, "we kick her out. Immediately." I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins. Vanessa giggled then, a light, tinkling, utterly horrifying sound, barely containing her gleeful excitement. "Exactly, darling. And by then, all her considerable inheritance, every last penny, should be legally ours anyway." "Bye-bye, Mother," Colin scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound that cut me to the core. Mother, she doesn't mean a damn thing to me, never really has. She's just dead weight and inconvenience. I've got you now, baby. What the hell do I possibly need her for anymore? A chill, so profound it felt like shards of ice, shot straight through my spine, piercing my very soul. This was the child I had loved with everything I had, the child I had sacrificed for, defended, nurtured. I had held our home together after Richard died. I had raised him, guided him, watched him grow from a helpless infant into a man. I had bailed him out of every foolish mess, paid off every shameful debt, shielded him from the consequences of his own recklessness. And now, in his cold, calculating eyes, I was nothing more than a burden to be discarded, an obstacle to be removed. Where, oh where, had I gone so terribly wrong? What had I done, or failed to do, to raise such an ungrateful, heartless, monstrous man? Maybe I had loved him too much. Maybe I had given too freely, too unconditionally, foolishly believing that true love was all about selfless, endless sacrifice. And maybe, just maybe, that very sacrifice, that constant giving without expectation of return, had inadvertently taught him that he was perpetually entitled to everything, that the world, and everyone in it, owed him. My mind, reeling from the fresh, raw wound of their betrayal, drifted to a painful memory I hadn't consciously visited in years. Colin was still in college, young and reckless, the first time he got seriously, dangerously, tangled up in gambling. He had managed to rack up tens of thousands of dollars in shady debt before I even knew what was happening, before the first threatening calls started. When the menacing loan sharks, with their cold eyes and veiled threats, came knocking at my door, I finally realized just how deep, how terrifyingly, he'd sunk. He had knelt at my feet then, a pathetic, sobbing wreck, begging me to save him, swearing on his father's grave that he'd never, ever gamble again if I just helped him this one last time. And I, his ever-forgiving mother, I believed him. Far too easily, far too quickly. I cut him off from his generous bank accounts, effectively locked him in the house for weeks, desperately hoping he'd finally see the devastating damage he was inflicting, not just on himself, but on our family, on our future. But instead of contrition, he raged. He smashed priceless heirlooms, kicked holes in doors, screamed vile, incoherent threats. "If you keep this up, Mom, if you give me what I needed, I swear to God, I'll kill myself," he had yelled, his face contorted with a terrifying, self-pitying fury. Still, even then, I couldn't bring myself to completely give up on him. I wanted so badly, so desperately, to believe there was still hope, still a flicker of the sweet boy I remembered. Until one day, I brought him a comforting bowl of hot chicken soup, his favorite. He snatched it from my hands and, in a fit of pique, threw it directly in my face. The scalding liquid burned my arm, red and raw, the pain a searing shock. He stood over me, seething, his eyes blazing with an irrational hatred. "How long are you planning to torture me like this, you old bitch?" I remember kneeling there on the cold kitchen floor, silently, painstakingly, cleaning up the shattered pieces of the porcelain bowl and the spilled, greasy soup, while my skin blistered and throbbed, saying nothing, my heart a leaden weight of despair. Was it wrong to bail him out then? To give him yet another chance? Or was my real, fundamental mistake believing, against all mounting evidence, that someone so emotionally hollow, so profoundly self-absorbed, could ever truly learn to love, to appreciate, to feel genuine gratitude? Now, on the surface, his life looked more put together than ever before, with his impending fatherhood and his supposed new responsibilities. But underneath that thin veneer of respectability, he had only grown colder, more calculating, more insatiably greedy. In his eyes, I no longer possessed any intrinsic worth, any value beyond the monetary. That night, after overhearing their vile plotting, I finally cried myself to sleep, a storm of bitter, disillusioned tears. What I didn't know then, couldn't possibly have conceived, was that something even more vicious, even more diabolical, was already waiting just around the corner, poised to strike. The morning sunlight, soft and deceptively gentle, filtered through the slatted blinds, casting pale, elongated stripes across the bedroom floor as I slowly, reluctantly opened my eyes. Out of long-ingrained habit, I turned my head toward the side of the bed, expecting to see him. Goofy. But the worn, familiar rug beside my bed was starkly, alarmingly empty. There was no sign of my old faithful companion, the scruffy terrier mix who faithfully curled up at my feet every single morning, nudging me gently awake with his damp, cold little nose. A tight, suffocating knot formed instantly in my chest. I sat bolt upright in bed, threw off the heavy blanket, and instinctively glanced toward the bedroom door. By now, Goofy should have been there, his tail wagging a frantic, joyful rhythm, his intelligent brown eyes bright with anticipation, ready for our usual leisurely morning walk in the dew-kissed backyard. But today, he wasn't. Goofy, come here, sweetheart. I clapped my hands together, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, unnerving stillness of the house, and walked quickly to the doorway, my eyes anxiously scanning the living room. I checked near the sofa, his favorite napping spot, under the dining table, by the foot of the stairs. Nothing. I hurried into the kitchen, my heart beginning to pound with a growing unease. His water bowl, positioned by the refrigerator, was still reassuringly full, which meant he'd definitely been home last night. But his food dish, I now noticed with a jolt, was completely empty, licked clean. A cold wave of serious unease started to rise in my chest, threatening to engulf me. Goofy, I called again, my voice louder now, sharper with a nascent panic, as I strode purposefully toward the back door. I stepped out into the yard. The freshly mowed grass glistened with morning dew, the air rich and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. But I couldn't enjoy any of it, couldn't appreciate the beauty. Goofy, come on now, boy. This isn't funny. My voice echoed across the unnatural stillness of the garden, but only the indifferent chirping of unseen birds answered me. My fingertips grew cold, numb. That gnawing anxiety, that vague unease, had now settled, solidified, into something far darker, far more terrifying, a cold, hard dread. I rushed back inside, my movements frantic now, and searched every single room, every closet, every conceivable hiding place. I looked behind the heavy sofa again, under every bed, in all the closets, behind shower curtains, even in the laundry hamper. Still nothing. Finally, my desperate search led me to his dog bed, tucked away in that little sunny corner of the utility room. That small, familiar space, once cluttered with his old, beloved blankets, 2 tattered chew toys, and his favorite squeaky rubber ball, was now disturbingly, immaculately pristine, as if no dog had ever lived there, had ever curled up and dreamed his doggy dreams. And that's when it hit me, with the force of a physical blow, the terrible, sickening realization. He hadn't just wandered off. He'd been taken. A violent chill, sharp and invasive as a knife, shot up my spine, tracing the length of my back, leaving me trembling and breathless. I turned, my legs feeling like lead, and walked slowly, deliberately, into the living room. Colin and Vanessa were sitting casually at the dining table, calmly eating breakfast, chatting and laughing, as if they hadn't a single care in the world. Vanessa was idly dragging her long, manicured nails against her porcelain plate, making an irritating, grating, scraping sound that set my already frayed nerves on edge. I paused, taking a deep, steadying breath, forcing my voice to remain even, despite the tremor I felt deep inside. Colin, Vanessa, have either of you seen Goofy this morning? Colin didn't even bother to look up from his plate. He took a large bite out of a strip of greasy bacon and waved his hand dismissively. Oh, the dog. Yeah, I took him out early this morning. Dumped him somewhere out in the countryside. Don't worry about it. A deafening, roaring silence exploded in my mind, as if my entire body, my very soul, had been brutally hollowed out in a single, devastating blow. You've what? My voice came out in broken, strangled gasps, my nails digging so deeply into my palms that I drew blood, as I struggled to maintain even a shred of composure. Colin finally glanced up, his expression one of lazy, bovine indifference, still chewing his food with a revolting, open-mouthed relish. It's just an old dog, Mom. Always getting in the way. shedding everywhere, smelling up the place. Figured the house would be a lot quieter, a lot cleaner, without him around. My ears rang, a high-pitched, incessant whine. My stomach churned violently, as if I'd been repeatedly punched in the gut. "You have no idea," I whispered, my voice shaking uncontrollably. No idea what he meant to me. My fingertips were pale, trembling, cold as death. He shrugged, completely, appallingly unfazed by my distress. "Come on, Mom. Don't make such a ridiculous big deal out of it. You're 60-odd years old. What are you doing keeping a demanding old dog around anyway? You've wasted 12 good years and God knows how much money on that damn mutt. Honestly, I did you a favor. Now you don't have to deal with all the hassle anymore. I stared at him, at my son, my lips quivering, utterly speechless. The betrayal too enormous, too monstrous for words. Vanessa set down her fork with a delicate clink, dabbed at her perfectly painted mouth with a linen napkin and said, her voice coolly, casually indifferent, honestly, "Helen, you really should be thanking Colin. He made the right practical decision for you. For all of us." I didn't reply. I just stood there, frozen in an agony of grief and disbelief, my eyes drifting involuntarily to the small antique coffee table. An old faded photograph sat there in a simple silver frame. In it, a much younger, happier version of myself was sitting on the familiar sofa, holding a tiny, wriggling 1-year-old Goofy in my arms, smiling with a genuine, uncomplicated warmth I could still vividly, painfully remember. That dog, that sweet, loyal, loving dog, had been my comfort, my steadfast companion, my only constant through years of loneliness and quiet heartbreak. And now, they had casually, cruelly taken him from me, without a flicker of remorse, without a shred of human decency. The morning sun poured brightly through the large windows, bathing the room in a cheerful, golden light, but I had never, in my entire life, felt so profoundly, so utterly cold. It was as if my heart, already bruised and battered by years of his neglect, had finally, irrevocably caved in, collapsing into a void so dark, so deep, so terrifying that I couldn't even find the bottom. Colin had hurt me before, countless times. I'd swallowed the pain, the disappointment, the humiliation. I'd reluctantly, painfully accepted that I'd somehow raised an ungrateful, selfish, emotionally stunted man. But I never ever thought that the final devastating blow, the one that would finally, completely break me, would come from the loss of my dog. In that moment of searing, absolute clarity, I understood something with a terrible, unshakable certainty. It was time. It was long past time to cut this toxic, farcical charade of a mother-son bond. Once and for all. By the time I finally mechanically walked away from the dining table, leaving them to their indifferent breakfast, Colin and Vanessa still showed absolutely no signs of remorse, no flicker of understanding for the profound pain they had inflicted. If anything, they seemed to believe their callous, cruel behavior was perfectly justified, even commendable. I spent the entire remainder of that dreadful afternoon sitting quietly, motionlessly, in my room, my heart slowly, almost unnervingly, returning to a state of eerie, unnatural calm. Goofy, I thought, a silent vow forming in my numbed mind. If you were still here, my sweet boy, I'd want you to see this. To see how they'll pay. How they'll pay for their monstrous cruelty. The next day, my resolve hardened into a diamond-edged certainty. I returned home from a series of discreet errands with a document, carefully, expertly disguised as a standard house transfer agreement. Smiling with a serene, almost beatific calm I didn't truly feel, I handed it to Colin. "All necessary paperwork is ready now, dear," I said, my voice even and pleasant. "Consider it my little gift to your growing family." Colin's eyes lit up instantly, a greedy, triumphant light I knew all too well. He snatched the papers from my hand with the eagerness of a starving man who had just hit the lottery, his voice brimming with an ill-concealed, repulsive excitement. The noise, his exclamations of delight, brought Vanessa hurrying down from upstairs, her face glowing with a barely concealed, avaricious delight. She leaned in close to scan the document quickly, her smile stretching wider, more predatory by the second. But when she reached the final page, the signature page, her triumphant expression faltered just slightly. Her eyes narrowed, a brief, almost imperceptible flicker of suspicion, or was it confusion, passing through them. Then, with a dismissive shrug, she dropped onto the plush sofa, crossed her legs elegantly, and assumed the imperious posture of a woman fully, confidently in control. "Well then," she announced, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction, "I guess this lovely house is finally ours now. So, Helen, when exactly are you planning on moving out?" Just as I expected. My cue. I blinked, feigning a look of innocent, wide-eyed surprise. "Move out? But where would I possibly even go?" Vanessa shrugged again, her voice colder than ever, callously brushing away any lingering pretense of familial obligation or concern. "Honestly, Helen, that's your problem now, isn't it? Not ours. We're certainly not responsible for where you choose to live." I turned to Colin, my eyes deliberately filled with a calculated, desperate plea. "Colin, dear, I really don't have anywhere else to go. Couldn't I please stay here, just for a little while longer, until I can make other arrangements?" He looked away then, pointedly avoiding my gaze, a faint flush rising on his cheeks. "There are plenty of nice rentals out there, Mom. Just find a place. You'll be fine. You'll be fine." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until every last detail of my own plan, was perfectly in place. I gently, imploringly, took his arm, my voice soft, subdued, and full of a feigned vulnerability. "But Colin, I've been taking such good care of you both here. I can keep cooking your favorite meals, keep the house clean and tidy. I promise, I won't be any trouble at all." Vanessa frowned, clearly weighing the practical pros and cons of my offer, her sharp mind no doubt calculating the convenience of an unpaid live-in servant. Then, with a casual, dismissive nod, she conceded. "Fine, let her stay for now. At least she's still somewhat useful around the place." In that single, arrogant moment, she already saw herself as the undisputed mistress of the house, the queen of my castle. Colin, seeing her agree, didn't bother to argue further. "Yeah, whatever. Stay if you want." I lowered my head, carefully hiding the small, grim smile that curled at the corner of my lips. The more relaxed, the more complacent, the more arrogant they became, the easier it would ultimately be to expose them, to bring them down. The truth was, I'd seen, through their transparent manipulations, their selfish greed, long, long ago. Ever since the exhausting, expensive wedding preparations, when Colin, at Vanessa's relentless insistence, had systematically drained every cent I possessed to fulfill her endless, extravagant demands, the overpriced, ostentatious ceremony, the luxury imported car, the substantial down payment for their trendy city apartment. I had paid for it all, mortgaging my own future for their fleeting whims. And now, here I was again, back in my own home, reduced to playing the demeaning part of an unpaid, unwanted housemate. From that day on, Vanessa no longer bothered to hide her burgeoning sense of entitlement, her casual disdain for me. "Bring me some water, Helen," she barked one sweltering afternoon, slamming her palm imperiously on the polished coffee table, as if she were summoning a recalcitrant servant. "And make it quick. Honestly, you're getting worse and worse at this every day." I forced a tight, subservient smile and dutifully brought her the requested glass of chilled water. She took one small, deliberate sip, then immediately, theatrically, spat it out, the water splashing unpleasantly onto my clean blouse. "Ugh, are you actively trying to burn me alive, you stupid old woman? Me and the baby." The fury that surged within me, hot and fierce, almost shattered my carefully maintained composure. But I managed, through sheer force of will, to maintain a thin, placid smile. "I'm so sorry, Vanessa. My apologies. I'll get you another one right away." She clicked her tongue in sharp annoyance and waved me off dismissively. "Forget it. Just go grocery shopping. And for God's sake, make something decent, something edible, for dinner tonight. I nodded meekly, picked up the reusable grocery bags from the hook by the door, and stepped out of the house. But the moment I crossed that familiar threshold, the moment I was out of their sight, a meticulously crafted plan, a plan that had been slowly coalescing in my mind for weeks, had already formed, clear and sharp and ready for execution. I drove to the supermarket, my expression calm, almost serene, carefully selecting ingredients from the brightly lit aisles while mentally assembling my own unique version of a revenge menu. No, it wouldn't be cheap, obvious tricks like greasy fast food or overly sugar-laden desserts. That was too crude, too easy to trace back, too unsophisticated. No, I would serve them something far more subtle, far more insidiously effective. I filled my shopping cart with their favorite comfort foods, an array of high-calorie, highly addictive, deceptively indulgent dishes. Creamy, buttery mashed potatoes, thick slices of buttered toast, rich baked macaroni and cheese, oozing with cheddar, decadent duck confit, a velvety sweet pumpkin soup, a velvety sweet pumpkin soup, and, of course, all their most beloved processed meats, their favorite high-sodium sauces, and calorie-dense snacks. Everything they loved, everything that sounded hearty and nourishing on the surface, but which would, slowly but surely, weigh them down, fog their minds, dull their senses, and erode their bodies from within. That night, I laid out a veritable feast, a full groaning spread of their culinary desires. Colin, true to form, devoured the cheesy casseroles and the creamy risotto like a starved, ravenous animal, chuckling with greasy satisfaction between enormous mouthfuls. "Wow, Mom, your cooking's even better than ever. This is amazing." Vanessa, equally appreciative, sipped the thick, oily pumpkin cream soup I had deliberately made extra rich, a pleased, smug smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. Well, looks like keeping you around for a bit longer was actually a rather smart move after all, Helen. "Eat as much as you like, dears," I said sweetly, my voice dripping with false solicitude as I pushed more food toward them. "You both look like you've lost a little weight lately. You need to build up your strength." I watched them gorge themselves, an almost imperceptible, grim smile rising in my chest, a cold, hard satisfaction. They didn't notice a thing. Not the subtle, insidious trap slowly, inexorably closing around them. Not the creeping fatigue that would soon begin to insinuate itself into their bones. Not the mental fog that would gradually, progressively begin to cloud their judgment, their perceptions. And I simply kept cooking. The next day, and the day after that, I meticulously, devotedly followed the same insidious pattern. Meal after rich, decadent, unhealthy meal. The more they ate, the calmer, the more centered I felt. Every single bite they consumed brought me one crucial step closer to my ultimate goal. But just as everything seemed to be falling perfectly, seamlessly, into place, something unexpected, something deeply unsettling, threw my carefully calibrated plan dangerously off course. While I was routinely tidying the living room one afternoon, my eyes happened to glance at Colin's expensive laptop, carelessly left open and unattended on the sofa. And in the next horrifying second, my blood, which had been running with a cold, vengeful purpose, turned to absolute ice. While I was engaged in the mundane task of tidying up the living room, dusting surfaces and plumping cushions, my eyes happened to drift, almost accidentally, toward Colin's open laptop. He must have forgotten to close it when he'd last used it, its screen still glowing with a paused browser window. I hadn't intended to snoop, truly. It was a purely inadvertent glance. But the stark, chilling words displayed on the screen stopped me cold, my duster clattering unnoticed to the floor. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly family member. Discreet methods. Common methods of individuals going missing without official protection. Or investigation. How to legally reassign a trust fund beneficiary after confirmed death of primary. I only managed to read a few horrifying lines before a profound, visceral chill spread rapidly down my spine, settling like a block of solid ice along my back, stealing my breath. In that single terrible moment, I knew, with an absolute, unshakable certainty, that my life, in their cold, avaricious eyes, had been callously reduced to a mere dollar amount, a target with a lucrative payout. Maybe it was a cruel twist of fate, maybe it was sheer, dumb luck. But that one accidental, horrifying glance at his screen might have just saved my life. Without a moment's hesitation, I snatched my coat and keys and drove straight to the main office of the city's largest insurance provider, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sitting stiffly at the polished reception desk, I struggled to keep my voice steady, to betray none of the terror and fury roiling within me. "Hello, I'd like to check if anyone has recently taken out a new life insurance policy under my name, Helen Dawson." The polite, efficient employee typed for a few moments, her fingers flying across the keyboard, then pulled up a file on her monitor. "Yes, Miss Dawson," she nodded, her expression neutral. "There is indeed a high-value life insurance policy registered under your name. Premium tier, actually. It appears to be one of the most expensive, comprehensive plans we currently offer." She printed out the relevant document and handed it to me. I took it with trembling fingers, my hands feeling like blocks of ice despite the warmth of the office. I didn't need any more proof. I knew, with a sickening, visceral certainty, exactly what Colin and Vanessa were planning. To them, I wasn't family. I wasn't a mother, a human being with feelings and a life of her own. I was simply a payout, a lucrative windfall, waiting impatiently to be collected. When I returned home, the heavy policy document clutched in my purse like a venomous snake. They were lounging casually on the sofa, watching some inane reality television show, waiting for me as if nothing untoward had happened, as if their monstrous plan wasn't currently unfolding. Colin, surprisingly, actually stood up to greet me, a rare display of feigned courtesy. He even reached for my shopping bag with that familiar, cloying, phony warmth that now made my stomach churn. "Hey, Mom, you must be absolutely exhausted from running around all day doing errands." He always, without fail, pulled out the dutiful, caring son act when he needed something from me, when he was plotting something. I kept my expression carefully unreadable, a mask of serene composure, as I sat down heavily in my usual armchair. "What's all this sudden solicitude about, Colin?" I asked, my voice deliberately light. Colin scratched his head, attempting to appear casual, almost sheepish. "Well, Mom, Vanessa and I were thinking, maybe we could take you out to the National Forest tomorrow. You know, hike some of those scenic trails, get some fresh air, a complete change of scenery. It'd do you good." Vanessa chimed in immediately, her timing impeccable, placing a gentle, solicitous hand on my back, her voice dripping with a false saccharine contrition. "Oh, Helen, dear, I've been so terribly moody lately, haven't I? Snapping at you for no good reason at all? I'm truly, deeply sorry. I thought it might be nice for all of us to reset, you know? Spend some peaceful quality time together, just the three of us." I nearly laughed out loud at their transparent, amateurish performance. If I hadn't already, by sheer chance, uncovered their diabolical plan, I might have actually foolishly believed their little charade of affection, their sudden concern for my well-being. But now, I saw it for what it was, the setup for their final act. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and nodded. "Why, that sounds lovely. I'll go." They both looked momentarily stunned by how easily, how readily I agreed. Vanessa was the first to recover, quickly schooling her features into another bright, false smile, and ushering me solicitously toward my bedroom. "Great then, Helen. That's wonderful. You better go start packing your things right away. We're planning on leaving quite early in the morning to catch the best light." I didn't respond. I just went to my room and firmly locked the door behind me. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I stared at the empty, lightweight backpack I usually took on my own solitary hikes, my hands slowly, almost unconsciously, curling into tight, determined fists. I already knew, with chilling certainty, what they intended to do on that peaceful outing. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have imagined, was that I had started planning my own counter-move long before they ever did. It wasn't just them eagerly waiting for tomorrow. So was I. But the ending, I vowed silently, wouldn't be the one they so callously, so confidently imagined. After a breakfast consumed in an atmosphere thick with unspoken intentions, we set off. I sat quietly in the passenger seat of Colin's late-model SUV, my gaze fixed on the passing scenery as it grew increasingly barren, more desolate. The farther we drove from the familiar comforts of the city, the farther we journeyed, the quieter, the calmer my own heart became, a strange, almost ominous serenity settling over me. They had chosen a remote, rarely frequented state park situated on the rugged, undeveloped outskirts of town. I'd heard unsettling stories about it before. Every year, there were disturbing reports of hikers who had mysteriously, inexplicably disappeared, or who had accidentally fallen from its treacherous, crumbling cliffs. Treacherous, unmarked terrain, unmonitored, unmaintained trails. The place had earned a dark, sinister reputation among the locals. Not a good one. Colin, I knew exactly what kind of isolated, dangerous place this was. That's precisely, diabolically, why he had chosen it. And I, his intended victim, I knew it too. "Well, we're here," he announced, his voice falsely cheerful as he pulled the vehicle up near the desolate, unpaved base of the towering mountain. As I stepped out of the car, a sharp, biting chill, unrelated to the ambient temperature, crept insidiously up my spine, despite the bright, glaring daylight. Vanessa immediately, possessively, looped her arm through mine, her voice overly, unnaturally cheerful. "Helen, dear, what are you spacing out for? Come on now, don't kill the mood. This is going to be fun." I offered a warm, convincing smile in return. "Of course, dear. We're here to relax today, aren't we? Enjoy nature." We began the arduous ascent up the steep, winding trail, climbing higher and higher, the path growing narrower and more precarious with each step, until the late afternoon sun had turned the vast, indifferent sky a glowing, bruised shade of crimson. When we finally, breathlessly, stopped to rest near a so-called scenic overlook, a place with a sheer, terrifying drop on one side, we were just a few tantalizing steps from the windswept summit. Colin gestured toward a large, flat-topped rock. "Mom, why don't you sit down here for a bit? Take a breather. You must be tired." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a brightly colored sports drink, handing it to me with a solicitous smile. "Here, this is an electrolyte drink. Thought it might help you recharge after that long climb." I took the bottle with a grateful, appreciative nod and raised it to my lips, tilting it just enough to make it look as if I were drinking, taking a long, satisfying gulp. I never swallowed a single drop. As I carefully lowered the bottle, I caught a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance exchanged between Colin and Vanessa, a shared look of smug, triumphant anticipation. That tiny smug curl at the corners of their mouths confirmed everything I already knew, everything I had prepared for. Perfect. I pulled 2 foil-wrapped energy bars from my own small backpack and held them out. "You two should probably eat something too. It's been a very long, strenuous climb." They took the bars eagerly, almost snatching them from my hand, tearing into the wrappers without a second thought, without a flicker of suspicion. So eager, in fact, so consumed by their own impending success, that they didn't even notice the faint, almost invisible tear marks I'd carefully, meticulously concealed on the sealed packaging earlier that morning. I sat calmly on the rock, pretending to rest, to recover my strength. Then, with a theatrical sigh, I let my body go limp and dramatically collapse to the dusty ground, as if overcome by sudden weakness. Right on cue, I heard Vanessa's delighted, unrestrained laugh. She actually drank it. Oh my God, that was way too easy. Colin's voice followed, colder, more devoid of emotion than I'd ever heard it before. "Sorry, Mom, but I really need that insurance money." I felt them begin to drag me, my feigned dead weight an awkward burden, toward the precipice, likely aiming for a secluded spot, well off the main trail, somewhere remote where no one would easily find a body. I counted silently in my head, my senses preternaturally alert. 1, 2, 3. Then, a sudden, satisfying noise. 2 heavy, distinct crashes hit the ground just behind me. I opened my eyes, a grim smile touching my lips, and slowly, deliberately, stood up, brushing the loose dirt and pine needles off my clothes. They lay sprawled, unconscious, on the hard ground, their faces slack, their limbs askew. You see, I never drank that doctored electrolyte concoction they'd offered. I'd only pretended to, a carefully rehearsed pantomime. The real trick, the real poison, was in the energy bars I had so generously offered them. Energy bars meticulously laced with the very same potent sedatives they had so foolishly, so carelessly, hidden in their room in my house over the past few days. I'd quietly found their stash, borrowed a small, effective little out, and today I had simply, elegantly, returned it to its rightful, deserving owners. Trying to trap me? You're both far, far too naive, too arrogant. I shot them one last, cold, cutting glance, then slung my lightweight backpack over my shoulder and began walking, with a steady, unhurried pace, back down the now darkening mountain. As night fully fell, the temperature on the exposed mountainside would drop sharply. Wild animals, hungry and opportunistic, often wandered these remote trails after dark. If Colin and Vanessa didn't manage to find their way back down, to safety, before true darkness enveloped them, well, that would be their own harsh, unforgiving lesson to learn. Let them have a genuine taste of real, desperate survival for once in their coddled, entitled lives. I hummed a little tune to myself, a jaunty, almost forgotten melody from my youth, as I descended, step by careful step. Just as I neared the familiar trailhead, the air growing cooler and damper, I suddenly heard faint, desperate cries nearby. Weak, broken, almost animalistic sounds, calling urgently for help. I stopped in my tracks, every sense on high alert, turned toward the sound, and carefully, cautiously, made my way through the dense, thorny undergrowth. There, lying in a tangle of bushes and sharp rocks, was a man, his leg bent at an unnatural, sickening angle, his face pale and contorted with agony, his eyes glassy and unfocused from excruciating pain. He looked to be around my own age, perhaps a little older, dressed in expensive, high-quality hiking gear. His voice, when he spoke, trembled uncontrollably. "Please? Can you call for help?" I didn't hesitate for a second. I immediately dialed emergency services, my voice calm and clear as I relayed our location and the nature of his injury. I then stayed by his side, offering what little comfort I could, until the wailing siren of an ambulance finally, blessedly, arrived. At the brightly lit, sterile hospital, I sat quietly in the otherwise deserted waiting room as they carefully wheeled him into the emergency room. A long, anxious while later, a kind-faced doctor emerged, his expression reassuring. "He's going to be okay," he announced. "He's out of immediate danger now. A nasty fracture, but he's a lucky man you found him when you did." When the injured hiker finally regained full consciousness, I heard his name clearly for the very first time. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice still weak but surprisingly firm. "I'm Leonard Graham, Executive Director of the Graham Group." My heart skipped a beat, a jolt of astonished recognition. The Graham Group, the very same highly influential, incredibly successful investment firm Colin's struggling company had been so desperately, so obsequiously, trying to secure a major investment from for months. How interesting. Fate, it seemed, never forgets its intricate, ironic timing. I never mentioned the rather significant connection between Leonard Graham and my son, Colin. "You saved my life," Leonard said from his hospital bed, his gaze direct and filled with a profound gratitude, still weak but gripping my hand with a surprising, reassuring strength. "If ever anything at all you need, anything in this world, Mrs. Dawson, Helen Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, just ask. Whatever I can possibly do, I will do it, without hesitation. I smiled gently and patted the back of his hand. I just happened to be there, Mr. Graham. Doing the right thing doesn't always need a reward. He spoke with such genuine sincerity, such heartfelt conviction, but I preferred, for now, to keep this unexpected, potentially significant encounter to myself, a quiet, intriguing twist of fate I'd rather treasure privately. As I rose to leave his private room, I saw that the hallway outside was already crowded with an anxious coterie of well-dressed executives, concerned assistants, and worried-looking friends, all rushing in to check on him. Even lying injured in that sterile hospital bed, Leonard Graham carried the calm, unmistakable authority of a man long accustomed to commanding a room, to making important decisions. He wasn't just another anonymous patient. He was clearly someone of considerable importance, of significant influence. And for the first time in what felt like a very, very long while, I felt something in my own chest loosen, a heavy, suffocating weight inexplicably lifted. I didn't know, at that precise moment, whether Colin and Vanessa had managed to safely return from their misadventure on the mountain. But strangely, surprisingly, I wasn't in any particular rush to find out. Colin had probably never imagined, not even for a fleeting second, that his supposedly frail, aging old mother was actually a long-time, active member of a local, highly respected mountaineering club, extensively trained in advanced wilderness first aid, and, despite her years, in considerably better physical shape than most people half her age. That night, back in my own blessedly empty, silent house, I slept like a baby. A deep, dreamless, profoundly restorative sleep. When I finally woke the next morning, the bright, cheerful sunlight was spilling softly, invitingly, across my pillow. The bedside clock read nearly 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone, my fingers dialing the emergency number with a feigned, shaky, breathless urgency. "Hello? Oh, please, you have to help me," I cried, my voice artfully laced with panic and despair. "My son, Colin Dawson, and my daughter-in-law, Vanessa. They went hiking up at Sable Ridge yesterday, and they haven't come back. I'm so terribly worried. Please, oh please, you have to find them." The operator's voice on the other end grew instantly serious, professional. "Ma'am, please try to stay calm. We're dispatching a search and rescue team to Sable Ridge immediately. Can you give me their descriptions?" 5 agonizingly long hours later, hours I spent calmly, drinking tea and reading a good book, I received the call I had been anticipating. "Mrs. Dawson, we've found them." I took my time getting to the hospital, feigning a mother's distraught haste. When I finally, slowly, opened the door to their shared hospital room, I found Colin and Vanessa lying pale and haggard in their respective beds, looking like a pair of thoroughly soaked, miserable stray cats. Colin turned his head weakly towards me, his eyes dull and accusing. "Mom, where did you go yesterday?" I blinked innocently, my expression one of pure, bewildered concern, keeping my voice soft, almost apologetic. I'm not entirely sure, dear. I just remember waking up in a different hospital room myself, disoriented." I carefully, theatrically, rolled up my pant leg to reveal a neatly wrapped, impressive-looking ankle bandage. The doctor said it was just a mild sprain, thankfully. I must have blacked out. Vanessa gasped, her breath still ragged and shallow. We both just passed out, all of a sudden. It doesn't make any sense, did you?" I quickly waved my hand, cutting her off with a look of profound, wounded surprise. "Vanessa, dear, what on earth are you implying? Why would I ever do something like that? I love you both dearly. I've been absolutely sick with worry." Colin frowned, as if trying to piece together a confusing, elusive puzzle, but eventually said nothing more. "Forget it," he mumbled finally, flopping back against the stiff hospital pillow in apparent defeat. During their subsequent hospital stay, Vanessa, true to her nature, didn't miss a single beat in returning to her usual demanding, imperious self. "I'm craving fresh Boston lobster today, Helen," she'd announce. "And tomorrow, I simply must have abalone soup. I absolutely need to nourish my body properly after that dreadful ordeal." Once I would have gently, patiently reminded her to eat light, simple foods while recovering. But not now. Oh no, not now. I simply smiled sweetly, nodded agreeably, and trotted off to the hospital cafeteria, or when necessary, to upscale local restaurants to procure her desired delicacies. I prepared everything just the way she liked it, and for good measure, I added a rich, creamy homemade chicken soup to her daily menu, every single day, never missing a single serving. She drank it all down with a smug, self-satisfied relish, and I watched her, quietly, contentedly. On the day they were finally discharged, robust and apparently fully recovered, I knew this elaborate, draining charade had at last reached its final, satisfying act. Colin returned to his company offices the very next morning, beaming with a renewed if misplaced hope, only to be abruptly stopped at the main entrance by a stern-faced security guard. "Excuse me, sir. I work here. Why can't I get in?" he demanded, his voice laced with indignation. The guard didn't flinch, his expression impassive. "System's correct, sir. You've been removed from employee access." Colin froze, his face paling. He frantically messaged the company's senior executives, his thumbs flying across his phone screen, only to receive a series of curt, dismissive replies. "Your position has been terminated, Mr. Dawson, effective immediately. The company no longer requires your services." It hit him like a physical blow, a brick to the chest. He came home that evening in a complete daze, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow and unseeing, and collapsed heavily onto the sofa. I looked over at him casually from my armchair, where I was peacefully knitting. "Rough day, dear? You seem a little upset." His lips tightened, his fists clenched and unclenched in his lap. Then, he finally snapped, unable to hold in his bewildered fury any longer. "Am I really that worthless? Why? Why would they just fire me like that without any explanation?" I walked over and gently, maternally, patted his head. Now, Colin, don't be so discouraged. I have money, remember. I'll take good care of both of you. You shouldn't have to stress yourselves over work anymore. In fact," I added, as if struck by a sudden brilliant idea, "why don't I send you two on a wonderful, relaxing vacation? A chance to clear your heads, a little recharge your batteries. What do you say?" He looked up then, startled by my unexpected offer, a flicker of his old calculating hesitation in his eyes. But then, the lure of an all-expenses-paid trip proving too strong, he nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe that wouldn't be so bad after all." Of course, he said yes. I knew him far too well. He had never in his entire selfish life turned down anything that even remotely smelled like an easy, unearned benefit. Vanessa, overhearing, chimed in eagerly from the kitchen, her voice bright with anticipation. "A vacation? Oh, Helen, that sounds absolutely perfect. We really do deserve a proper break after everything we've been through." And just like that, with a few clicks on my computer, I booked them a lavish, 7-day, all-inclusive trip to a luxurious resort in Thailand. They had absolutely no idea that this was to be my final, carefully orchestrated gift to them. One last act of quiet, calculated, and ultimately liberating kindness. As for me, I was already eagerly, joyfully, turning the page to a brand new, unwritten chapter in my own life. Leonard Graham's elegantly embossed business card sat quietly, expectantly, in the top drawer of my antique writing desk, a silent promise of interesting possibilities. He'd called a few days after his discharge from the hospital, his voice warm and genuinely friendly, asking to see me again. "I still owe you that dinner, Helen," he'd said, a gentle humor in his tone. "And not just to say thank you again. I really do want to see you again, if you're amenable." I ran my fingers lightly over the raised lettering on that expensive card, feeling a surprising, unfamiliar softness unfurl in my heart, a sensation I hadn't experienced in many, many years. Maybe, just maybe, my real life, the one I had unknowingly put on hold for decades, was only just beginning. The very first thing Colin did, after landing in the tropical paradise of Thailand, was, predictably, message me. His tone a familiar blend of entitlement and impatience, asking for a substantial amount of travel money. I transferred the requested funds without a moment's hesitation, even adding, with a benign, maternal smile emojis. "If it's not enough, dear, just let me know. Enjoy yourselves." That one seemingly innocuous sentence, that open-ended offer, completely unchained their already considerable spending habits. From a few $1,000s, their expenditures quickly escalated to tens of thousands. From fancy, Michelin-starred restaurants to exclusive high-end luxury boutiques, they indulged themselves without a shred of restraint, without a flicker of financial conscience. And each time they requested more funds, I, their ever-obliging mom, sent the money generously promptly, without a single word of caution or reproach. Meanwhile, back home, in the quiet solitude of my now blessedly empty house, I began the systematic, deeply satisfying process of clearing them out, piece by painstaking piece. I hired a discreet, efficient moving company. I meticulously packed up every last item they owned, every piece of clothing, every forgotten trinket, every piece of accumulated junk, anything that carried their scent, their negative energy, and sent it all directly to the local community donation center. Anything remotely valuable, any expensive gifts I had foolishly lavished upon them over the years, I donated to various deserving charities. I left absolutely nothing of theirs behind. Then, with a profound sense of liberation, I changed all the locks on the doors and windows. By the time they finally, reluctantly, returned from their so-called luxury vacation, tanned but no doubt already anticipating their next handout, my comprehensive cleanup was already complete. Every step had been executed flawlessly, with precision and a quiet, steely determination. As soon as they got off the plane, their phones no doubt already buzzing with declined credit card notifications, I sent them my final devastating blow, a meticulously detailed, itemized invoice of everything they had extravagantly spent during their week-long trip. Every single item, every single dollar, was clearly, unequivocally marked borrower, Colin Dawson. Because, of course, none of that money had actually come from my personal accounts. I had simply, cleverly, advanced it all through Colin's own existing, and now massively overdrawn, credit line, a line I knew he had pushed dangerously past its limit on numerous previous occasions. Just as he liked to do with everything, and everyone, in his life. I had merely, with a certain ironic satisfaction, followed his implicit instructions and let his own name, his own creditworthiness, or lack thereof, do the paying. They had foolishly, arrogantly, thought my money was theirs for the taking. But there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world, a lesson they were about to learn the hard way. All my adult life, I truly, sincerely believed I'd been a good mother, a devoted mother. When he, Colin, inevitably lost his way, as he so often did, I was always the one who patiently, lovingly, pulled him back from the muck again and again and again. When trouble came knocking, as it frequently did in his chaotic orbit, I was the one who steadfastly held everything together, without hesitation, without complaint. I thought, with a mother's enduring, often blind, hope, that if I just loved him deeply enough, showed him enough kindness, enough forgiveness, eventually, one day he'd give me even a tiny sliver of genuine warmth, of sincere gratitude in return. I was catastrophically, devastatingly wrong. Love, no matter how pure, how sincere, how self-sacrificing, never, ever guarantees it will be reciprocated. The frantic, desperate noise outside my securely locked door had finally, blessedly, quieted. I cautiously peeked through the small peephole and saw Colin and Vanessa collapsed in a heap on my doorstep, their faces ashen, their consciousness rapidly fading. I didn't hesitate for a moment. I immediately called 911, my voice calm and collected as I reported 2 unresponsive individuals on my property. Years of their self-indulgent, unhealthy lifestyle, the endless stream of high-fat, high-sodium, high-sugar meals I had so lovingly prepared, combined with the intense emotional unraveling of their recent failures and the acute stress overload of their current predicament, had finally, inevitably caught up with them, dragging their bodies into a state of near collapse. Later, at the hospital, the attending doctor informed me, with a grave expression, that they might never fully, completely recover. A persistent, debilitating weakness, he said, would likely be their new, unwelcome, normal. I offered a small, enigmatic smile. That's really no concern of mine anymore, doctor. As I turned to leave their shared hospital room, Colin, his voice a faint, reedy whisper, managed to utter one faint, barely audible sentence. Mom, I'm sorry. I paused at the door, turning just slightly, my expression unreadable. You're right, Colin, I said softly, my voice devoid of any inflection. You should be profoundly sorry. Sorry for being a thankless, manipulative, emotional parasite for your entire adult life. I turned then and walked away, my footsteps light and unburdened. Behind me, I heard the sharp, urgent beeping of a heart monitor, a sudden flurry of nurses rushing into the room, their voices urgent and concerned. I stood outside in the sterile corridor for a moment, watching the chaotic scene unfold behind the impersonal glass, nothing more than a detached, dispassionate observer to a story, a drama I no longer belonged to. Maybe, I thought with a sudden, startling clarity, maybe I never truly had what most people call family at all. My phone rang then, its cheerful, familiar chime, a welcome intrusion. A beloved name lit up the screen. Leonard. Where are you, Helen? His warm, steady voice inquired. I'm coming to pick you up right now. The moment I heard his voice, something in my chest, something that had been tight and bruised and aching for so very long, finally, blessedly, softened, relaxed. I drew in a long, cleansing breath, wiped away the lingering remnants of past emotion from the corners of my eyes, and walked with a newfound lightness toward the hospital's main entrance. Soon, a sleek, dark sedan pulled up quietly, smoothly, in front of me. I raised a hand in greeting and smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. Long time no see, Leonard. Leonard smiled back from behind the wheel, his eyes crinkling warmly at the corners. It's been far too long, Helen, and I think it's high time we finally started taking each other a little more seriously, don't you? I didn't answer him right away. I simply opened the passenger door and slid gracefully into the comfortable leather seat beside him. Leonard was the kind of rare, remarkable man who radiated an aura of innate calm, of quiet strength, the moment you were near him. Not loud, not overbearing, not demanding. He never tried to take center stage in my life, never imposed his will or his opinions. But he was always consistently the one holding the steady, unwavering light when I felt most lost, most adrift in the darkness. In the days and weeks that followed, I began to slowly, peacefully grow accustomed to his comforting, undemanding presence in my life. He took me to small, charming out-of-the-way book clubs. He gently encouraged me to join a pottery class at the local arts center, something I'd always secretly wanted to try. We walked together in the crisp, golden mornings, a companional silence often more eloquent than words. We cooked simple, healthy meals together in the sun-filled afternoons, a shared, easy rhythm developing between us. He listened patiently, without judgment, when I finally felt ready to talk about Goofy, sharing my grief, my enduring love for my lost companion. And he let me share the darker, more painful memories when they occasionally, unexpectedly, surfaced, offering not platitudes, but a quiet, empathetic presence. I began the joyful, liberating process of redecorating my house, systematically stripping away all the heavy, oppressive remnants of a life I had once meticulously, dutifully arranged for someone else, replacing them, piece by piece, with my own tastes, my own passions, my own joy. The kitchen, once a constant battleground of resentment and obligation, became a peaceful, creative haven where I now cooked only for myself, and occasionally for Leonard, relishing the simple pleasure of nourishing my own body and soul. In the sunny backyard, I planted a fragrant, thriving herb garden, mint, rosemary, lavender, thyme, their resilient green shoots pushing eagerly towards the sun, much like my own spirit had finally begun to do. Leonard never made grand, sweeping promises of undying devotion. He didn't talk of forever or happily ever after. He just stayed, quietly, steadily, reliably, living beside me, not for me, a subtle but profound distinction. Sometimes we'd sit together on the porch swing in the evenings, with steaming mugs of herbal tea in hand, and he'd gently take my fingers in his and say, his voice full of a quiet understanding, "Helen, my dear, you finally stopped living for everyone else, haven't you?" I'd smile then, a real deep smile that reached my eyes, and nod. Yes, I was finally, truly, wonderfully living for me. One sun-dappled afternoon, I received an anonymous, unmarked package in the mail. Inside, I found a sheaf of internal company documents, clearly executive-level personnel changes and project reassignments from the Graham Group. Colin's name, I noted with a distinct lack of surprise, had been completely, thoroughly erased from every single project file, every organizational chart. I didn't need to ask who had sent it. I already knew. Leonard, when I next saw him, didn't say a single word about it either. He just brewed me a fresh, fragrant cup of my favorite Earl Grey coffee and set it quietly, comfortingly, on the small table beside my armchair, just like he always did. I took the warm cup, looked at him over the rim, and smiled, a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding. "Thank you, Leonard." He only smiled back, his eyes warm and kind, saying nothing, needing to say nothing. In that quiet, unassuming moment, I realized something profoundly important. Real, true happiness doesn't always arrive with a deafening burst of celebratory fireworks or a dramatic, sweeping orchestral score. Sometimes, often, it simply, quietly, comes after the storm, in the gentle, unassuming form of a steady, reliable hand, reaching out, quietly, comfortingly, for yours. 60 long years of life, and finally, I was no longer trapped, no longer defined, by the suffocating toxic walls of one broken, dysfunctional relationship. As for what comes next, I honestly don't know if my twilight years will ever read like some grand, sweeping fairy tale romance. But I do know this, with every fiber of my being. I'm writing my own story now, with my own pen, in my own voice. And it will be a story of peace, of purpose, and of quiet, well-earned joy. That evening, we sat together in the tranquil backyard, listening to old, scratchy jazz records on Leonard's vintage turntable, while the sun, a molten ball of fire, slowly, majestically, sank behind the distant, silhouetted trees, painting the sky in glorious hues of orange, pink, and violet. "Helen," Leonard asked gently, his voice a soft murmur in the deepening twilight, Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I turned to look at him then, at his kind, thoughtful face, my eyes calm, clear and certain in the fading light. "Maybe, Leonard," I said softly, a gentle smile playing on my lips. "Maybe I already am.